Mei Zong was pouring her first cup of coffee when darkness fell across Tokyo. She looked up through her apartment window to see an impossible shadow creeping across the morning sky, a massive obsidian structure blotting out the sun. Her hand remained steady as she set down the pot, military instincts from 15 years as a combat pilot taking over. Citizens of Earth, boomed a multitonal voice from everywhere at once, translated simultaneously into every language. We are the Vectran Collective. You have 3 minutes to surrender your world. Resistance will result in planetary sterilization. Mi's eyes narrowed as she studied the vessel's distinctive hull patterns, geometric configurations that haunted her dreams. 5 years ago, her entire squadron had been vaporized during what officials called a training accident over the Sea of Japan. Only Mai survived, with fragments of memory. Those same patterns, that same metallic sheen, just before her wingmates disappeared in flashes of blue light. Her government had called her traumatized. Delusional. Her phone vibrated, an unknown number with a Geneva prefix. "Captain Zhang," said a woman's voice when Mai answered. "This is Dr. Eliza Chen, Extraterrestrial Defense Initiative. Code Valkyrie, it's active." Mi's breath caught. "EDI is real," I thought. "The simulation we've been running. It's happening now." Chen's voice was controlled, methodical. "Transport arriving on your roof in 40 seconds. Bring nothing." Across the planet, 12,000 individuals received similar calls. Retired special forces, brilliant programmers, disgraced scientists whose radical theories about alien contact had cost them their careers. People who had glimpsed the truth and been silenced. The Vectrans, monitoring Earth's communication networks, observed the expected chaos erupting. News anchors abandoned professionalism, their voices breaking as they reported the arrival. Religious leaders called for prayer. Military channels buzzed with confused orders and counterorders. Admiral Jex observed the primitive species' predictable response from his command center. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of satisfaction among his kind. "Exactly as anticipated," he told his bridge officers. "Their neural architecture is incapable of coordinated response under pressure. Begin landing preparations for the occupation force." What the Vectrans failed to detect was the quantum-encrypted subchannel operating beneath the chaos, a network built by Dr. Chen's team over the past 5 years, immune to Vectran monitoring technology. "All assets mobilizing," reported Commander Jackson Torres from his underground facility beneath Houston. Officially discharged in disgrace last year over corruption allegations, Torres had actually been reassigned to his true role, commanding Earth's secret space fleet. 38 seconds elapsed, Chen noted, watching as 12,000 green dots lit up her global display. Thunderbolt satellites repositioning. In Moscow, notorious hacker Dmitry Volkov was escorted from his prison cell by stern-faced guards. They led him not to execution, as he feared, but to a room containing a specialized terminal. "Your country needs you," said the intelligence officer waiting there. "The device you claimed hacked alien transmissions." "You were right." Volkov's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "How long do we have?" "Less than 2 minutes." He grinned. "Plenty of time." Back in Tokyo, May's feet hit the landing pad on her apartment roof as a hypersonic transport decloaked before her. The pilot nodded grimly as she boarded. "Captain Zhang, they told us you predicted this day." "Not predicted," Mai corrected as the transport accelerated toward the Yokosuka subterranean defense facility. Remembered. 1 minute and 12 seconds had elapsed. The Vectrans continued monitoring Earth's chaotic surface communications, satisfied with humanity's disorganized panic. They had no idea that beneath the noise, humanity's counterattack was already underway. The Yokosuka facility doors sealed behind me as she sprinted down a corridor that shouldn't exist. The underground complex had been disguised as a water treatment plant for the past 4 years, built in secret by international engineers working under diplomatic cover. "Briefing in motion," said Colonel Takeda, matching her pace. Vector and shields are susceptible to quantum disruption at 75.3 Hz frequency. Their troops operate on hive mind principles, overwhelm the command node, disrupt the collective. They emerged into a cavernous hangar where technicians swarmed over sleek aircraft unlike any Mai had ever piloted. The fighters' hulls rippled with adaptive camouflage, their outlines blurring as if reluctant to commit to a single form. X-92 Phantoms, Takeda explained. Reverse-engineered from fragments of their scout ship we recovered in Antarctica. Computer integration is neural. The system adapts to your thoughts. 1 minute, 40 seconds elapsed, announced a synthetic voice through the facility. Mi's eyes widened at the sight of her squadron. Pilots from Russia, Israel, China, the United States, nations that officially remained bitter rivals. Their flight suits bore a unified insignia, a stylized Earth with a lightning bolt. Politics is luxury we can no longer afford, said Colonel Amir Hassan, her assigned wingman from the Iranian Air Force. He offered his hand. I studied your combat records, Captain Zhang. The real ones. In Geneva, Dr. Chen's command center had transformed into the true nerve center of Earth's defense. Holographic displays tracked the activation of systems the public never knew existed. Orbital platforms disguised as communications satellites, underwater installations masked as research stations. Commence Protocol Trojan Horse, Chen ordered. Across the planet, world leaders began broadcasting carefully crafted surrender messages, their faces drawn with convincing fear. Please remain calm, announced China's premier. Earth accepts the terms of the Vectoran Collective. We urge all citizens to cooperate, echoed the American president. Resistance will only bring suffering. Admiral Jex received these transmissions with the expected satisfaction. The Supreme Council would be pleased. Another conquest without depleting their antimatter reserves. Sir, his tactical officer interrupted. I'm detecting anomalous energy readings from the planet's poles. Disregard, Jex commanded. Primitive fission plants experiencing fluctuations. Standard response to civilization-wide panic. Beneath Houston, Commander Torres guided his flagship toward the primary launch tunnel. The vessel, officially scrapped during budget cuts 3 years ago, had instead been enhanced with technology even most world governments didn't know existed. All vessels report ready, his executive officer confirmed. Strike packages armed. Torres nodded. Launch in 15 seconds. Target package Omega-6. In Moscow, Dmitry Volkov's fingers danced across his terminal, executing the infiltration protocol he'd spent 5 years perfecting. The Vectoran communication architecture had fatal flaws only a human mind could recognize, their perfect mathematical encryption blind to the chaotic improvisations of a species evolved to find patterns in noise. I'm in, he announced. Deploying ghost protocols. Outside EDI's secured channels, Earth appeared to descend into chaos. Traffic gridlocked major cities as civil defense sirens wailed. Military units seemed to mobilize without coordination, tanks and aircraft moving in contradictory patterns. The Vectorans observed what they expected to see, a primitive species in disarray. They didn't realize they were watching an elaborate performance of holographic projections, autonomous vehicles, and carefully controlled social media storms, a deception conceived by behavioral psychologists working alongside military strategists. 2 minutes, 15 seconds elapsed, the synthetic voice announced throughout Earth's hidden facilities. On Chen's command display, a single message flashed, Operation Blitzkrieg commencing. The counterattack was about to begin. Launch, Mai commanded, and her X-92 Phantom surged from Yokosuka's hidden bay, acceleration pressing her against the neural adaptive seat. The fighter systems merged with her consciousness, not through crude implants, but via quantum entanglement fields that bridged the gap between technology and thought. The sensation was disorienting yet familiar, like recovering a limb she hadn't known was missing. Phoenix Squadron, deploy distortion fields, she ordered as 11 other Phantoms joined formation. Their hulls rippled, bending light around them through principles stolen from the Vectran's own technology. Executing attack vector Chimera, Colonel Hassan confirmed beside her. 30 seconds to contact. Above, Torres' fleet emerged from concealed lunar installations. Unlike May's stealth squadron, these vessels made no attempt to hide. Their purpose was to draw attention. All ships broadcast on Vectran frequencies, Torres ordered. Make us look desperate and disorganized. His comm officer nodded. Broadcasting conflicting orders and panic signals now, sir. Clever humans, muttered Lieutenant Viller, monitoring communications aboard the Vectran mothership. As the only silicon-carbon hybrid among the collective's officer corps, he noticed patterns his pure silicon colleagues missed. 5 years earlier, Viller had made contact with Earth through encoded transmissions disguised as cosmic background radiation. His people, the Alteri, had been the third species conquered by the collective, their resistance crushed in minutes. But decades of serving their conquerors had taught them patience. Now, watching the humans' apparent chaos, Viller recognized the deception. He subtly adjusted the sensor calibrations, creating a blind zone where May's squadron approached. None of his fellow officers noticed. The changes fell within acceptable error parameters for a system tracking thousands of objects. Confirm landing zone security measures. Admiral Jex commanded. Prepare the first wave of suppression units. Around him, the mothership's systems operated with perfect efficiency, unaware that half their communication channels now passed through Dmitry Volkov's terminal in Moscow, where his algorithms subtly altered threat assessments and response priorities. We're being herded, muttered the tactical officer, the first to sense something amiss. Sir, the humans' defense patterns appear random, but statistical analysis suggests. You attribute strategy to instinct, Jex interrupted. These creatures react from primitive fear centers. Their coordination is illusion, emergent patterns from individual panic responses. In Geneva, Dr. Chen monitored both the real battle and the Vectran's perception of it. They're still convinced, she told her team. Activate the quantum disruptors on my mark. The true nature of Earth's defense lay not in its weapons but in its thinking. While the Vectrans processed information sequentially, each input analyzed with perfect logic before the next. Human minds operated in constant parallel, intuition and analysis working simultaneously. Dr. Chen had weaponized this difference. The Trojan Horse Protocol didn't just deceive the aliens. It overwhelmed their cognitive architecture with contradictory data streams their linear processing couldn't reconcile. Contact in 10 seconds, May announced to her squadron. Remember the simulation. They'll detect us 3 seconds before intercept. Too late to reconfigure their shields. Hassan's voice remained steady. Primary targets are propulsion nodes and communication arrays. Second-pass targets sensor clusters. The Phantoms accelerated to attack velocity, their pilots enhanced reflexes compensating for G-forces that would render conventional humans unconscious. On Earth, civilian broadcasts continued showing panic and surrender. Military channels projected confusion and defeat. Social media erupted with convincing fabricated footage of alien troops materializing in major cities. And in Moscow, Volkov executed his master code. Deploying fractal virus, he reported. Vectran communications compromised. For exactly 7 seconds, the mothership's sensory network experienced what the collective engineers would later term recursive feedback anomaly. 7 seconds was all May's squadron needed. Execute attack run, she ordered as her targeting systems locked onto the suddenly vulnerable mothership. Strike now. The mothership's hull shimmered as May's squadron penetrated the 7-second blind spot. Their quantum-tipped missiles, each containing modified versions of the alien's own technology, struck with surgical precision. Multiple direct hits, Hassan confirmed, his fighter banking sharply to avoid debris. Communication arrays Alpha through Delta neutralized. The Vectran vessel shuddered, its perfect symmetry disrupted as secondary explosions cascaded along its eastern quadrant. Inside, emergency protocols activated as Admiral Jex staggered from the impact. "Impossible," he roared. "Full defensive deployment. Target those human vessels." But his orders propagated through compromised channels. The mothership's defensive batteries activated 3 milliseconds too late, firing at predicted positions while the X-92s had already executed maneuvers no Vectron simulation had anticipated. "Second attack run," Mai commanded, her consciousness partially merged with her fighter systems. She perceived trajectories not as calculations but as intuitive paths, selecting approaches that exploited the blind spots in alien targeting algorithms. Meanwhile, Torres' fleet engaged the mothership's forward batteries in what appeared to be a conventional assault. His vessels absorbed punishment that would have vaporized Earth's publicly known military technology. "Hull integrity at 83%, reported his damage control officer. Torres nodded calmly. "Maintain offensive pattern. We need to hold their attention for 40 more seconds." Dr. Chen monitored the battle from Geneva, where her quantum encryption specialists worked to protect Earth's true command channels from Vectron counter-intrusion. "Phase 2 activation in 15 seconds, she announced. "Orbital platforms aligning." The platforms, disguised as weather and communication satellites, had been positioned over 5 years, each containing components too small to trigger alien detection algorithms. Only when activated simultaneously did they form Earth's most powerful weapon. "Sir," the Vectron science officer reported, "we're detecting unusual radiation patterns from the planet's orbiting objects." Before Admiral Jex could respond, Lieutenant Veller made his move. "Initiating diagnostic sequence," he announced, fingers dancing across his console. Instead of the standard procedure, he executed a hidden command that temporarily rerouted the mothership's sensor data through tertiary systems he had modified during maintenance cycles over the past year. "Multiple sensor ghosts detected," he reported, his voice perfectly calibrated to project appropriate concern. "Human vessels appearing to multiply." The tactical display showed Torres' fleet seemingly splitting into multiple identical formations, an impossibility the Vectron combat intelligence struggled to reconcile with its programming. "Primitive holographic countermeasures," Jex dismissed. "Target all projections." But the distraction achieved its purpose. For crucial seconds, attention diverted from May's squadron as they executed their most critical attack run. "Target locked," May announced as her fighter aligned with the mothership's primary power distribution node, a vulnerability identified from fragments of Vectron technology recovered after previous covert incursions. Deploying quantum disruptors, her squadron launched specialized warheads designed not to destroy but to create localized fields where quantum uncertainty became amplified. Within these fields, Vectron technology, dependent on predictable quantum states, began to fail. On Earth, Dmitry Volkov's intrusion reached the mothership's central command protocols. "I've accessed their target prioritization systems," he reported, redirecting defensive fire away from our assets. Jex watched in mounting horror as his ship's perfect defensive coordination began to fragment. Systems reported contradictory data, response times lagged, and automated protocols executed with inexplicable delays. 2 minutes, 45 seconds elapsed, announced Dr. Chen's synthetic tracking system. The battle had barely begun. But already the Vectrons faced a situation their strategic simulations had deemed impossible: effective resistance from a supposedly primitive species. On his command chair, Admiral Jex made a decision. "Prepare the planet killer weapon," he ordered. "We will sterilize this world immediately." His weapons officer hesitated. "Sir, the charging sequence requires 30 seconds. "Then begin now," Jex thundered. "These humans must not be allowed to exist 15 seconds longer than necessary." "Planet killer charging detected," Dr. Chen announced, her voice steady despite the implications. "Executing Phase 3. In orbit, Earth's disguised platforms completed their alignment, forming a precise geometric constellation. Each activated specialized emitters that generated a hemisphere of quantum interference above the planet. "Shield integrity at 80% and rising," reported Chen's chief physicist. Estimated protection against Vectron sterilization beam. 63% coverage. Not enough to save Earth completely, but sufficient to ensure humanity's survival if Torres and Mai completed their objectives. Aboard her X-92, Mai received updated mission parameters directly through her neural interface. "Commander, my squadron is being redirected," she informed Torres. "New objective: internal sabotage." Torres acknowledged without hesitation. "We'll maintain external pressure." "Good hunting, Captain." Mai banked her fighter toward a new vector, directly toward the mothership's secondary hangar, now exposed from their earlier strikes. "Phoenix Squadron, adjust formation for penetration run. Prepare for atmospheric transition." The X-92s reconfigured mid-flight, their adaptive hulls shifting to withstand the pressurized environment of the alien vessel. This capability, developed after studying the wreckage of a Vectron scout ship, had never been tested in actual combat. Inside the mothership, Lieutenant Veller monitored the planet killer's charging sequence, subtly introducing calculation errors that would delay its firing. Each manipulation required perfect timing to avoid detection by the ship's automated safeguards. "Sir," he reported to Admiral Jex, "the weapon's calibration systems are experiencing fluctuations. Firing accuracy may be compromised." Jex slammed his control panel. "Override safety protocols. I want that planet reduced to ash." Unbeknownst to the Admiral, his orders passed through communication channels now partially controlled by Dmitry Volkov. The Moscow hacker had penetrated deeper than even EDI's planners had thought possible, exploiting a fundamental vulnerability in Vectron computing architecture. "They process everything sequentially," Volkov explained to his team as his algorithms deployed through the alien systems. "Their security expects attacks to follow logical progression. They have no defense against simultaneous intrusions across multiple access points." In Geneva, Dr. Chen revealed the final element of humanity's strategy to her command staff. "The Vectrons evolved on a world with 90-minute days," she explained. "Their neural architecture adapted for extended deliberation, perfect for developing advanced technology, but sacrificing reaction speed." The holographic display illustrated the difference between human and Vectron thought processes, one resembling lightning strikes across countless parallel pathways, the other a methodical but linear progression. "They believe their 3-minute ultimatum is generous," Chen continued. "To their perception, it's equivalent to giving us days to surrender. Their fatal miscalculation." Mi's squadron approached the hangar bay at attack velocity. "Impact in 5 seconds, she warned. "Brace for deceleration." The X-92s fired reverse thrusters simultaneously, their momentum carrying them through the hangar's energy barrier. They skidded across the deck, conventional physics reasserting itself as they transitioned from flight to ground assault mode. Vectron security forces responded with predictable precision, emerging in perfect formation, their weapons charged in textbook defensive patterns. But their programming never anticipated humans' chaotic adaptability. Mai's pilots scattered in seemingly random directions, each creating multiple avenues of attack that overwhelmed the aliens' linear response algorithms. "Advance to the central core," Mai ordered, drawing her sidearm as she sprinted from her fighter. "Remember your training. They can't track multiple targets moving unpredictably." In Moscow, Volkov achieved his deepest penetration yet. "I've accessed their core programming," he reported, deploying the final virus. The virus, named CHAOS, represented humanity's understanding of the fundamental difference between human and Vectron cognition. It didn't attack their systems directly. Instead, it introduced minuscule random elements into their processing, imperceptible variables that compounded exponentially. To silicon minds evolved for perfect predictability, this represented cognitive equivalent of vertigo. As the planet killer reached 80% charge, systems throughout the mothership began to falter. "Planet killer at 90%, Lieutenant Veller announced, his voice betraying no emotion despite the sabotage he continued to perform. "Targeting systems locking on planetary core." Admiral Jack stood at the command platform center, mandibles clicking in satisfaction despite the unexpected resistance. One push of his control node would end this troublesome species forever. "Sir," interrupted his second-in-command, "security reports human intruders have breached intersectors 12 through 17. "Impossible," Jex snapped. "No species could penetrate our defenses so quickly." The tactical display updated to show May's team advancing through the mothership at a pace that defied Vectran combat simulations. Where the aliens deployed precisely coordinated defensive formations, the humans responded with what appeared to be chaos, splitting into smaller teams that attacked from multiple angles simultaneously. "They're not following any recognizable doctrine," the security chief reported, confusion evident in his tone. "Each human appears to be making independent tactical decisions without central coordination." This was humanity's greatest weapon, not their technology, but their evolutionary heritage. While Vectran warriors operated as extensions of their hive intelligence, humans had evolved as pack hunters capable of both coordination and individual initiative. May led her fire team through the mothership's labyrinthine corridors, guided by schematics Lieutenant Veller had transmitted to Earth months earlier. 2 minutes, 50 seconds elapsed, announced her neural interface. 10 seconds remaining. In Geneva, Dr. Chen activated the final phase of Earth's defense. "All systems. Execute protocol checkmate." Taurus fleet suddenly broke their engagement pattern, ships scattering in seemingly random trajectories. The Vectrans tracked them with their weapons, but couldn't target them all simultaneously, exactly as planned. "Now, Mr. Volkov," Chen ordered. In Moscow, Volkov executed his master command, not an attack, but a complete withdrawal of all intrusion protocols. For one crucial second, the mothership's systems experienced what would later be termed a phantom limb response, reaching for the human intrusion that suddenly disappeared. In that moment of computational confusion, every system aboard the massive vessel returned to baseline, including the now sabotaged baseline that Lieutenant Veller and his resistance cells had modified over years of careful preparation. "What's happening?" demanded Admiral Jex as his command console flickered. "Status report." "Systems rebooting," reported his increasingly frantic crew, detecting anomalous code throughout all primary networks. Aboard the mothership, May reached the central junction connecting the vessel's quantum core to its weapon systems. "Target acquired," she reported, planting the phase disruptor, a device EDI had developed specifically to exploit vulnerabilities in Vectran energy distribution networks. "Deploy on my mark," she told her team. "Synchronize with external assets." As the countdown reached 2 minutes and 59 seconds, Torres positioned his flagship at the precise coordinates Dr. Chen had calculated, the focal point where Earth's orbital platforms would direct their combined energy. "Capacitors fully charged," his weapons officer confirmed, "ready to channel planetary defensive grid." In Geneva, Dr. Chen watched as the final pieces aligned. 3 minutes, she announced. "Execute." Multiple events occurred simultaneously. May's disruptor activated, creating a cascade failure in the mothership's power distribution system. Taurus fleet channeled the combined energy of Earth's orbital platforms into a concentrated pulse aimed at the vessel's compromised shields. Volkov's dormant algorithms reactivated throughout the Vectran systems, causing critical command functions to execute contradictory instructions. And Lieutenant Veller, his cover finally blown, physically disabled the failsafe controls of the planet killer weapon. Admiral Jex lunged to stop him, but found himself suddenly paralyzed. His neural connection to the ship's systems overwhelmed by the chaotic data patterns humans found so natural to process. 3 minutes, he whispered in disbelief. "We gave them 3 minutes." The Vectran mothership shuddered as systems failed throughout its massive structure. Emergency containment fields activated too late to prevent critical damage. Dr. Chen's voice transmitted across all frequencies. "Admiral Jex, your 3 minutes are up. Perhaps you should have given us less time. The mothership's brilliant white emergency lighting flickered to crimson as backup systems engage. Through corridors now filled with disoriented Vectran crew, May led her team toward the command center. Primary objective complete, she reported to Geneva. Moving to secure command staff. Admiral Jex staggered as artificial gravity fluctuated. Around him, his bridge officers worked frantically to restore control, their movements becoming increasingly erratic as Volkov's CAOS virus disrupted the neural synchronization that normally unify their actions. Deploy the secondary fleet, Jex ordered. Sterilize this planet at all costs. But his commands reached ships already under attack. Torres' fleet, having channeled Earth's defensive pulse, now executed precision strikes against the mothership's external communication arrays. The Vectran vessels holding position behind their moon received only fragmentary orders, insufficient to authorize planetary bombardment. Lieutenant Vaylor, wounded from Jex's attack but still conscious, dragged himself to a secondary console. Transmitting authentication codes now, he whispered into his hidden communicator. Throughout the 17 galaxies of the Vectran Collective, sleeper agents received his signal, the confirmation that humanity had successfully resisted. On 7 conquered worlds, carefully planned rebellions activated simultaneously. In Geneva, Dr. Chen received confirmation of the cascade effect. It's working, she told her staff. The collective's control structure is fragmenting exactly as we predicted. Her quantum physicists had identified the vulnerability years earlier. The Vectran command hierarchy depended on instantaneous communication, which their technology approximated through quantum entanglement. But the system had never been designed to withstand simultaneous disruption across multiple nodes. Their entire empire operates on the assumption that resistance is impossible once their ultimatum is delivered, Chen explained as data flowed in from distant monitoring posts. They've never developed contingencies for failure. Torres' flagship docked with the disabled mothership, Marine teams deploying to secure critical systems. Engineering reports the vessel's quantum core is stable, he informed Chen. We can prevent catastrophic collapse. May's team reached the command center, breaching the doors to find Admiral Jex standing defiantly amid his disoriented crew. The Vectran commander towered over the humans, his exoskeleton gleaming under the emergency lights. How? He demanded as May's soldiers secured the room. Our simulations were perfect. Your species lacks the neural architecture for coordinated response under pressure. May holstered her weapon. Your simulations were based on false assumptions. You studied our public communication channels, our official military doctrines, our apparent technology level. We monitored your species for decades, Jex insisted. We observed your chaotic governance, your tribal conflicts, your inefficient decision-making processes. You saw what we wanted you to see, May replied. While your scouts monitored our official channels, Dr. Chen's EDI was studying the fragments of your technology from previous incursions. From the doorway came a new voice. They never realized they'd been compromised. Dr. Chen entered, flanked by Torres and Volkov. The 3 architects of humanity's defense stood before the alien commander whose perfect invasion had collapsed in less than 3 minutes. Your species relies on sequential processing, Chen explained. Logical, methodical, precise, but fundamentally limited by linear thinking. Our neural architecture evolved differently. On the command center's main display, she brought up comparative scans of Vectran and human brain activity. Where the alien mind showed organized, predictable patterns, the human mind appeared chaotic. Countless connections firing simultaneously in seemingly random patterns. Your 3-minute ultimatum reflected your own processing limitations, Torres added. To your kind, 3 minutes is barely enough time to analyze a complex situation. To us, it's an eternity. Admiral Jex's posture shifted, the Vectran equivalent of dawning comprehension. Our greatest advantage was actually your critical weakness, May finished. On screens throughout the command center, reports streamed in from across the galaxy. The 17 systems of the collective were in upheaval as news spread of their flagship's defeat. "What happens now?" Jex asked, his voice carrying genuine uncertainty, perhaps the first time in his long life. Dr. Chen's expression remained neutral. "That depends on whether you can adapt as quickly as we can." 6 months after the Battle of Earth, representatives from 23 species gathered in Geneva's Grand Assembly. The newly formed Galactic Coalition occupied what had once been the Vectran mothership, now permanently docked in Earth orbit and repurposed as an interstellar embassy. Admiral Jex, no longer commanding collective forces but serving as the Vectran representative to the Coalition, stood before the assembly. His exoskeleton had been modified, its militant edges softened by ceremonial draping that signified his new diplomatic role. The collective existed for 12,000 years. He addressed the delegates, his voice translated through systems Dmitry Volkov had redesigned. In all that time, we never encountered a species that forced us to question our fundamental assumptions. Dr. Chen, now serving as Earth's chief representative, observed the reformed admiral with measured trust. The integration had not been simple. Many on Earth had called for more punitive measures against the Vectrans, but Chen understood that lasting peace required evolution on both sides. The 3-minute protocol has now been implemented across 17 former collective systems, she announced, bringing the assembly to order. Results confirm our hypothesis. The neural suppression imposed on conquered species can be reversed. On the station's medical deck, May supervised the rehabilitation of Lieutenant Veller and other resistance members. The hybrid officer had survived his injuries, though recovery had been complicated by his unique silicon-carbon physiology. "Your neural patterns are stabilizing," Mai told him, reviewing his brain scans. "The reintegration therapy is working." Veller flexed appendages that had been partially paralyzed by Vectran control implants. "My people were the first to have our neural architecture modified after conquest," he explained. The collective believed they were improving us by removing neural pathways responsible for what they termed chaotic thinking. "They engineered obedience," May observed. "They engineered predictability," Veller corrected. "The collective values certainty above all else. Your species represented the ultimate uncertainty." In the station's strategic command, Commander Torres briefed his multi-species security team. Star charts displayed the Coalition's expanding influence and the remaining Vectran holdout systems. 3 more worlds requested admission yesterday, Torres reported. The Coalition now encompasses 32% of former collective territory. Intelligence Officer Hassan highlighted regions still resisting. The hardline Vectran factions are centralizing around the Cygnus cluster. Their messaging emphasizes human unpredictability as an existential threat. "They're not entirely wrong," Volkov commented from his workstation, where he collaborated with alien programmers to develop new encryption protocols. "Our greatest strength is that we don't think like them." The assembly reached its climactic moment as Dr. Chen unveiled the Coalition Charter, a document that formalized the new interstellar community's founding principles. "The 3-minute protocol isn't just about neural rehabilitation," she explained. "It represents a philosophical shift. Where the collective imposed uniformity, the Coalition celebrates cognitive diversity." The Charter explicitly protected the right of all sentient beings to develop without neural modification. It established research initiatives to restore suppressed neural pathways in affected species. Most radically, it recognized multiple forms of intelligence as equally valid, a concept the Vectran collective had systematically rejected. Admiral Jex approached the document to add his species signature. "We believed our sequential thinking represented evolutionary superiority," he acknowledged. "We failed to recognize that different neural architectures evolved for different environments." As representatives from 23 worlds formalized their coalition, sensors detected unusual activity at the galaxy's edge. Long-range probes identified vessels of unknown configuration approaching Coalition space. "New contact," announced Torres' tactical officer. "Design parameters match no known species. Estimated arrival in Coalition territory." 3 weeks. Dr. Chen exchanged glances with Mai, Torres, and Volkov before addressing the assembly. It seems the universe has more surprises in store, she observed. Fortunately, the coalition now includes species with multiple cognitive approaches. Together, we'll be ready, whether we have 3 weeks to prepare or just 3 minutes. Admiral Jex's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned was amusement. 3 minutes, he reflected. More than enough time.